My name is Isabella Moore. I'm 31 years old, and until last year, I genuinely believed that loving someone meant helping them become the best version of themselves, no matter the cost. I was a senior software engineering manager at a fast-growing tech company in Silicon Valley, earning just over six figures, managing a team of 12 engineers, and finally feeling like the long nights and missed holidays had amounted to something solid. I liked structure. I liked clarity. And I liked believing that effort led to results. That's why Ethan Walker felt like such a natural fit when I met him. We met at a tech networking event where I was giving a talk on agile scaling and team leadership. Afterward, while people clustered around me asking about frameworks and metrics, Ethan waited patiently. When he finally introduced himself, he didn't flirt. He asked questions, real ones, about how engineering and marketing strategy overlapped. "You explain complexity in a way that actually makes sense," he said, smiling like he'd just discovered something valuable. That should have been my first warning. Ethan was charming in a way that felt intentional but not obvious. He talked about ambition, growth, potential. He said he worked in marketing coordination at a mid-sized agency, but was ready for more. He used words like leverage, trajectory, long-term vision. At the time, it sounded mature, focused. Our first few months were intoxicating. He talked about us as a unit. We, our future, power couple. He admired my career openly. "You've already built something real," he told me once. "Imagine what we could do together if I had access to the same world." I didn't notice the emphasis on access then. 8 months in, Ethan gradually moved into my apartment. No formal conversation. Just clothes appearing in my closet, his laptop permanently on my desk, his ambitions now fully intertwined with my resources. That's when the expenses started. Industry conferences, branding workshops, executive coaching, networking retreats. Every month, it added up to nearly $2,300. "Real partners invest in each other," he'd say when I hesitated. "You understand development cycles. Careers work the same way." I paid. I justified it. I believed him. What I didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't building a career. He was studying my world. At dinners, he'd steer conversations toward my projects. At night, he'd ask casual questions that felt harmless. Client timelines, internal challenges, budget pressures. I answered without thinking. We lived together. He was my boyfriend. And slowly, without me noticing, my trust became his currency. The first time I realized something felt off, it wasn't because of Ethan. It was because of the way my coworkers looked at me. We were at a company happy hour, nothing formal, just drinks after work. Ethan came along, dressed sharper than usual, confident in a way that felt rehearsed. I introduced him the same way I always did. "This is Ethan, my boyfriend." He smiled, shook hands, listened. Then, slowly, he started rewriting himself. "I do some strategic consulting," he told one of our product managers. "I specialize in growth optimization for tech teams," he said to someone else. "I've worked closely with engineering leadership," he added, glancing at me like I was supposed to nod. I didn't. I laughed it off. He was just trying to sound impressive, I told myself. Everyone does at these things. But as the night went on, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Ethan wasn't asking general questions. He was referencing specifics. "Our Q4 retention issue is really more about onboarding friction than feature gaps," he said casually to someone on my team. I froze. That wasn't public information. Later that night, Daniel Reyes, one of my senior engineers, pulled me aside. "Hey, Isabella," he said quietly. "Can I ask you something without it being weird?" I nodded. "Did you share internal metrics with Ethan?" "No," I said immediately. "Of course not." "He quoted our churn numbers," Daniel said. "Exact percentages. And he mentioned the client escalation we're still under NDA for." My chest tightened. I searched my memory, replaying conversations in my head. I had talked about work at home, complained, venting, normal stuff. "He must have picked it up from context," I said, even as the words felt thin. Daniel frowned. "That's not context, that's confidential." That night, I confronted Ethan gently. "You're talking about my work like you're part of it," I said, trying to keep my tone light. It made a few people uncomfortable. He looked genuinely surprised, then amused. "Isabella, relax," he said. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm just speaking the language. That's how networking works." "You introduced yourself as a consultant." "Well, I am," he replied smoothly. "I'm building something. You, of all people, should understand." Something in his tone shifted then, defensive, but also entitled. "You don't want me to sound small, do you?" he added. I thought you wanted us to grow together. And there it was. If I questioned him, I was unsupportive. If I hesitated, I was afraid of his ambition. So I stopped questioning. Over the next few weeks, Ethan started attending more of my professional events. Conferences I paid for, dinners with clients, meetups where my name carried weight. He collected business cards obsessively, took notes, followed up with people I hadn't even spoken to yet. One night I saw an email open on his laptop by accident. A subject line caught my eye. Private growth consultation, confidential. I didn't open it. I didn't want to invade his privacy. That was the lie I told myself. The truth was, I was scared of what I might find, because deep down I was starting to realize something terrifying. Ethan wasn't building his own path. He was extracting mine. The promotion dinner was supposed to be one of the best nights of my life. 5 years of grinding, late nights, missed birthdays, being the calm voice in rooms full of egos. That night, TechFlow's executive team officially announced my promotion to Senior Engineering Manager, complete with equity participation and a significant raise. It was validation, public, undeniable validation. I invited Ethan because, of course I did. He was my partner. He'd been talking for weeks about how proud he was of me. "You earned this," he said that morning, kissing my forehead. "Tonight is about you." I wanted to believe that. The restaurant was elegant, low lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of place where conversations stayed professional even over wine. My colleagues were relaxed, congratulatory. The CTO raised a glass. People clapped. I felt light for the first time in months. Then Ethan started drifting. While I was answering questions about team scaling and architecture decisions, he slipped away from my side. I noticed him leaning into conversations with executives I hadn't even had time to speak with yet. At first, I told myself he was just being social. But then I heard my name. "Isabella and I have talked extensively about the company's growth bottlenecks," Ethan was saying to someone from leadership. "There's a huge opportunity to optimize acquisition if the right strategic vision is applied." I turned toward him, confused. He was animated, confident, performing. By the time dessert arrived, he'd fully inserted himself into the room. He interrupted conversations, redirected discussions. He wasn't celebrating my achievement. He was using it as a platform. When I pulled him aside, my voice was low and controlled. "Ethan," I whispered, "this isn't the time." He smiled, but there was irritation behind it. "This is the time," he replied. "Everyone important is here." Before I could respond, he raised his voice. "Honestly," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "this is exactly what I've been talking about." The room quieted. "You're so focused on your own success that you don't even realize you're holding me back," he continued. "I need a partner who elevates my career, not someone who gets threatened when I step forward." Silence. Not the dramatic kind, the professional kind. I felt every eye on me. Executives, colleagues, people whose respect I'd worked years to earn. My face burned. My hands trembled. The CTO looked away. Someone cleared their throat. Ethan stood there, righteous, convinced he was making a point. I stared at him and finally understood something I'd been avoiding for months. This wasn't ambition. This was entitlement. "You're right," I said quietly, stepping back from him. "This is about elevation." Then I walked away. That night ended early. Conversations stayed polite, but something had cracked. My promotion was overshadowed by a moment I couldn't take back. And as humiliating as that night was, it still wasn't the worst thing Ethan had done. 2 days after the promotion dinner, Daniel Reyes called me. Not texted, called. "Isabella," he said, skipping any greeting. "I need to show you something, and I need you to promise you won't defend him before you see it." My stomach dropped. We met in a quiet cafe near the office. Daniel looked uncomfortable, like he'd been carrying something heavy and sharp. He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. Email threads, screenshots, attachments. The first message was from Ethan. "I offer discreet, high-impact consulting experiences tailored to executive growth. These sessions are private, immersive, and designed to unlock performance through personalized engagement." At first glance, it sounded vague, corporate, strategic. Then I kept reading. The pricing, the locations, the wording. Private sessions at luxury hotels. Hands-on guidance. Exclusive one-on-one development. My chest tightened. "Scroll," Daniel said gently. I did. There it was, clear enough to remove all doubt. Ethan wasn't just offering consulting. He was offering sexual services, disguised as executive strategy, using my company's internal challenges to sound credible before crossing the line. I felt sick. He approached 2 people on my team, Daniel continued, quoted our exact metrics, timeline pressures, budget constraints, Things no outsider should know. I whispered. He only could have gotten that from me. Daniel nodded. I know. Then he hesitated. There's more. He pulled up another thread, this one CC'd with a woman's name I recognized immediately. Lena Walker, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. They weren't just in contact. They were partners. Lena handled outreach, warm introductions, framing. Ethan stepped in later, positioning himself as the exclusive service. They'd been doing this for months, targeting my colleagues, my clients, my network, using my trust as their foundation. I contacted one of our biggest clients directly, David Chen, the marketing director. His reply came within minutes. Isabella, I thought Ethan was someone you endorsed. His knowledge felt too specific to question, but his proposals became inappropriate quickly. I stopped responding, but I kept everything. By the end of the week, compliance was involved. Legal teams, security reviews, investigations. Ethan's agency fired him immediately when multiple complaints surfaced. Industry groups blacklisted both him and Lena. Events revoked invitations. Doors slammed shut. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. You sabotaged my business, he said coldly. If you'd shared more information, I wouldn't have had to improvise. I stared at him, stunned. You were exploiting confidential data and selling access to my professional world, I replied. That's not innovation. That's a criminal operation. He packed his things that night. As he left, he looked back at me and said something I'll never forget. You never really supported my growth. The apartment felt silent after the door closed. But for the first time in months, it also felt clean. For a long time after Ethan left, I blamed myself. Not because I thought I was responsible for what he did, but because I had handed him the raw materials. My trust, my openness, my belief that intimacy meant transparency without limits. It took weeks before I could talk about work without my chest tightening. Compliance cleared me. Legal teams confirmed I hadn't violated any agreements. Professionally, I was safe. Emotionally, I felt stripped. I replayed every conversation in my head, every casual mention of deadlines, every frustrated sigh about budgets. All of it had been cataloged, repackaged, and sold. Not by a stranger, by the man I slept next to. I changed my routines. I stopped venting at home. I learned how to hold boundaries without guilt. I stopped equating support with sacrifice. And slowly my life expanded again. Without Ethan's constant financial demands, I had space. I mentored junior engineers. I joined an engineering leadership council. I remembered why I loved building systems, because they rewarded honesty, logic, and accountability. 6 months later, I met Mark Ellison. He was a product manager at a different company, calm, observant, ethical to the point of being boring, until I realized how rare that was. When we talked about work, he listened. He never asked for specifics, never pushed for access. He respected silence as much as insight. When I told him about Ethan, he didn't look shocked. Some people think ambition means extraction, he said. Others know it means competence. A year later, I was promoted again, this time to Director of Engineering. Mark stood beside me at the celebration, proud but never performative. He understood what it meant to earn something without exploiting someone else's trust. I don't know what happened to Ethan and Lena after the investigations. I stopped checking. Their growth was never my responsibility. What I do know is this. The day I stopped funding someone else's fake ambition was the day I started building real partnerships. Some people will see your career as an opportunity, your network as a resource, your trust as currency. Learn to recognize them early, and never confuse love with access.